Thanks everyone for dialing in. It's really great to see your faces, and I see more and more of you out now that we're walking all the time. So JT is from the Trust for Public Land, and he and Adair from the Hanover Conservancy. And is Betsy there? Betsy McGeehan?
Betsy's with us,
also Trust for Public Land. And then Rob Houseman from the town, as well as Vicki Smith. Did I miss anybody? Okay.
We have a couple more Trust for Public Land people. Shelby Sims from our Montpelier office, who's our Northern New England director, and Allie McDougall, who's our Northern New England philanthropy director, who's based in Portland, Maine, are both sitting in on this. But so we have a few extra Trust for Public Landers here.
Great. And so collectively, they have worked diligently for many years at this point. And so we want to thank you for sharing your time with us tonight to help us understand more about what's happening with the former Leavitt property.
That sounds great. So just I thank you for setting this up, Karen, and thank you for calling kind of an informal neighborhood meeting. I'm going to put this on mute, and the way this is going to work is that Rob and I are going to present for about 20 or 25 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for questions. And so please just save your questions for the end, and Karen will help play traffic cop on the questions, sort of fielding them as they come in and directing them. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody just so we can get through the slide presentation first. And then I am going to unmute Rob. You are, there you go. All right, so I am going to share my screen and get started in this. Rob, yes, you wanted to.
JT.
Yeah.
Oh, there I am. You're all set. Thank you.
Great. All right. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's JT Horn. I'm a senior project manager at the Trust for Public Land. We're going to talk about the Mink Brook Community Forest, which is, I think everyone in the neighborhood knows it as the Leavitt property. It's a partnership with the Town of Hanover, the Trust for Public Land, and the Hanover Conservancy to try and conserve this really special part of Hanover. And so the setting for this meeting is really, we really wanted to do this in person, in public. We were all excited to issue a press release and schedule a first community meeting about the second week of March. And then the whole world changed on us. And so we have been quietly working away at this project for years. And right at the moment when we were about to do the rollout, we've gone into this public health situation, which has made a public meeting inadvisable. So Karen, as a neighborhood person and a board member at the Hanover Conservancy, offered to do a less formal neighborhood briefing. And so thank you for participating. There will be more formal briefings, as the project moves forward, and we'll explain some of that at the end of the presentation. But I wanted to start with just an introduction to the Trust for Public Land, for those of you who don't know us. We are known as the Land for People organization. So we were founded in 1972 in California. We've been active in New Hampshire since 1987, and we've done a lot of work throughout the state. Our core values are really about community more than anything else. So Land for People means that as we pick our projects, we pick projects that help that help get people outside and get people connected with the outdoors. So we look for things like trails, and we do a lot of work in city parks and playgrounds. We're looking for active recreation use of the properties that we conserve. And I point that out as it's in contrast to groups like the Nature Conservancy, which are much more oriented towards biodiversity. We care about that too. We care about critters and wildlife and ecology and all of that, but our core values are really about community, health, climate, and equity. And the equity part of our mission really means that we want everyone to have access to the outdoors. And for our urban work, we have a theme nationally that we want everyone to live within a 10-minute walk of a park or a playground or protected open space. Not as relevant in rural settings, but that's our mantra for urban America. We were invited into Hanover in, I think, 2011 by Adair Mulligan and the Hanover Conservancy and Julia Griffin, who's the town manager, to try and assist the town of Hanover with some bigger, more complex acquisitions. And the first of those was the Hudson Farm, which was owned by Dartmouth College. And in 2017, it was added to the Appalachian Trail. And many people in the community rallied around that project and wrote checks to either the Trust for Public Land or the Hanover Conservancy to help make that happen. Ultimately, that project was a tremendous success. It's now part of the Appalachian Trail. I hope you've been out for a walk in the beautiful hayfields and on Town Highway 38. It's a real wonderful part of Hanover, and it really connects to the property that we're going to talk about today. And so we call the project we're working on a community forest, and I really differentiate that between a town forest, and there's 4 defining features that we really look for in our community forest program. One is community ownership. We want the community to have a stake in the land. Usually that means town ownership. Sometimes it can mean ownership by a local nonprofit. But we also really want community participation and a say in the management process. And so one of the things that differentiates a community forest from a town forest might be that a lot of town forests are managed very passively. And the goal for this Mink Brook property, the Leavitt property, is that there'll be a very active community role in defining the outcomes there, the trails, the kind of timber harvesting, the access, etc. The third thing that we look for are that the benefits flow back to the community. Sometimes this can be economic benefits in the form of timber harvest revenue. Sometimes it can be social benefits as a gathering place. Many of the community trail systems that we've helped create become what we like to think of as sort of a gathering place for the town, a town hall in the woods, if you will. And then the last hallmark of a community forest project is that there's permanent protection. We want to make sure that if we're all going to work hard to protect a place, that it's an enduring asset for the community. So that usually means some sort of a deed restriction or a conservation easement or something like that. So the Leavitt property on Greensboro Road, you probably all know it very well. It's the brick house with a field across the street from it, just before you get to Beryl Farms. And I see people like leaning in to look at the map. I'm sorry, it's a little bit far away, but this is part of a large green belt that circles downtown Hanover. And it starts with the Connecticut River in essentially the north on this map, and it continues through Oak Hill and the Water Company lands and the Appalachian Trail and Velvet Rocks, the Hudson Farm. And then one of the key strategies is, how do you get across Greensboro Road? And this would be for trails, this would be for wildlife movement. And when we were first invited to work in Hanover, the Leavitt property was really highlighted as a high priority for conservation because of where it sits in the landscape. There's a mix of a small hayfield, about 8 acres. There's a Mink Brook, about half a mile of the Mink Brook main stem is there, including a significant floodplain. And then there's a lot of wetlands. This is a really beautiful property if you're a naturalist and like to go explore looking for birds and critters and things. Some of the wetlands are quite pristine. So a little history on this. Adair has searched through the files of the Conservancy and assures me that this has been a conservation target for many, many years. Going back to the 1990s, we have some records of the Conservancy doing outreach to the Leavitt family to try and pursue a conservation project. This next part, you probably all lived through if you've been a longtime resident of Greensboro Road, with Paragon, who showed up in 2005 and proposed a fairly large-scale development, 330 plus units. It was going to be a continuing care retirement facility and residences, and it was quite a stir. I understand that the neighborhood really rallied at that time, and there were a lot of people who fought the development, and that led to a zoning change at town meeting. And in 2006, by petition, town meeting adopted new zoning that would make the continuing care retirement facility inconsistent with the zoning at the site. And then everyone started going to court, and the lawyers got involved. And there was litigation starting in 2006 that lasted for years, lasted over a decade. Trust for Public Land was invited in at the request of Julia Griffin and the Town of Hanover to help work on a conservation acquisition that would have to be married to a legal settlement for the litigation. And we worked quietly behind the scenes, confidentially, and we made many offers to Paragon to try and buy them out of this property and settle the lawsuit. These were really difficult negotiations. I won't bore you with all the details, but we have been working on this for a long time. I have been working on this for a long time, since 2011. Eventually, we just ran out of gas, and we made enough offers and felt like we'd made our best offer to Paragon, and said, you know, we just can't settle this thing. We can't seem to figure it out. And so we parted ways, and things went silent for a period of time. And then in 2017, the property was listed on the open market again. And what we'd heard was that Paragon finally just dropped the litigation and moved on. And so the Leavitts had been tied up in a contract between them and Paragon for that whole time. And it was very traumatic and difficult for the family. This is an important asset for them. It's an important part of their retirement. They really would like to sell it and move on with their lives. But when the lawsuit finally got dropped, it allowed the Leavitts to move independently of Paragon. And so after the property was listed on the open market, we made some quiet overtures through some folks in the community to the Leavitts. Nothing really stuck. And then in 2019, through the fabulous work of the Hanover Conservancy, they identified an anonymous donor who stepped forward and really made a catalyzing gift that allowed us to take a bigger risk on this property than we normally would. And so that donor has chosen to remain anonymous, but that early backing is what allowed us to reinvest in this project and dust off old offers and old plans. And it has led to an agreement with the Leavitts to purchase the property. And I'm going to walk you through what that purchase looks like. So we have a signed agreement with the Leavitt family. The purchase price is based on an appraisal. It's just shy of $2.2 million. And the appraisal really valued the development potential of this site for its residential development. You can put a fairly significant cluster development with a cul-de-sac on the north side of the road and about 6 or 7 small lots on the frontage on the southern side of the road while avoiding the floodplain. And so we had studied the maximum build out, and the appraisal is based on a very thorough due diligence to assess the fair market value, and we feel quite confident in that price. The contract has a deadline of mid-January of next year, and during that time, we have funding contingencies around public grants and making sure that things progress in a way that allows us to be successful with this campaign and this project. There's also a due diligence process that we have to go through, things like the appraisal, the title, the environmental, to make sure there's no hazardous waste. we're about to commission a survey. This is all normal real estate due diligence, but these things have to check out as well. And so what should happen to this property? Everyone has thought it's an important conservation opportunity. I think there's been strong neighborhood opposition to seeing it developed. And so we had been quietly inquiring with the community leadership, with the select board, with the Hanover Conservancy Board. And this is what we heard, that open space and trails close to downtown and all the people who work in the Route 120 corridor, the hospital, Hypertherm, all of the major employers, that having close to home recreation and outdoor experiences was really important. The idea of completing the green belt around downtown Hanover, also really important. And this is, again, a key property that allows you to get across Greensboro Road if you're Mink the Bear or if you're designing a new mountain bike trail system. There's a need for housing in Hanover and in the Upper Valley generally, and we'll talk about that in a second. We also, there's a funny little inholding in this parcel where the existing municipal water tank is that provides your water pressure if you're on town water. And in talking with the town engineer about what might happen there, he said, we're gonna have to replace that tank someday. And so we built that into the plan as well. We're very sensitive that Mink Brook is an important watershed in town, and that there's a lot of wetlands and biodiversity, but it's also a watershed that has a lot of infrastructure downstream. And so protecting it from flooding is really important. So the municipal sewage treatment plant, a couple of bridges, other trail systems are all downstream. So protecting Mink Brook for its water quality, for its drought, and for flood resilience is a really important goal. And then if you read the Hanover Open Space Plan and in everything that I've heard from folks in the community, protecting Hanover's rural character is really important as well. The farming legacy, the forestry legacy, many people have told me that they feel like Hanover is turning into a more suburban community, and that has its pros and cons, but I think we've heard a strong community sentiment about wanting to hang on to the rural character. So the project unfolds to try and address all of those community needs. First and foremost, the majority of the property would be conserved and would become the community forest. So that's about 250 acres, and it's the entire area shaded in orange on the map that you can see. So the entirety of the south parcel and most of the north parcel. And importantly, would all the land that abuts the Appalachian Trail, all the land that abuts Barrel Farms and the conservation easement there, and all of the Mink Brook frontage would be permanently conserved. We're setting aside about 3 acres for a future workforce housing project, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then we plan to resell the existing home on an acre or an acre and a half, something like that. And that's part of the financing for the project. So, because we need to raise $2.2 million and no one wants to see that beautiful home torn down, the plan is to basically resell it, and that's part of the financing for this larger acquisition. And then a whopping 0.2 of an acre would be set aside for the water tank. Basically just a little tiny postage stamp piece right next to the existing water tank to facilitate replacement someday. And we'll get into the details on all of these different outcomes. So the community forest piece, and Rob, this is where please jump in on anything that you want to highlight or address to supplement my comments. But the community forest is intended to be owned by the town in fee and managed by the Conservation Commission, but with a lot of help and support from the municipal staff and by volunteers and by groups like the Upper Valley Trails Alliance. Partnerships are really key to the stewardship of municipal town forest lands. There would be permanent deed restrictions running to the state of New Hampshire and the U.S. Forest Service, making sure it stays as permanent conservation land. and that's a function of how we anticipate the fundraising to go. The vision is to have trails and public access, and that includes hunting and fishing access. So one of the grants that we intend to go for through the state of New Hampshire through the LCHIP program will require a public access, including for hunting and fishing. So that will be codified in the deed restrictions as well. And then it is a working forest property. There was a timber harvest that was done about 3 years ago, and there's good growing stock that was left, and it's a source of potential municipal income from timber harvest in the future. I don't think it will ever be a huge source of revenue, but it is an important legacy for this land, and it's certainly an option. How intensive that timber program is would really be something that a community planning process would help inform. And then that community planning process, again, when we talked at the beginning about the community forest model, that community participation element is really important to us, and we think it makes for a better conservation outcome. And so we intend, whenever the public health situation allows for it or through alternate means, to try and figure out a way for the neighborhood to participate and trails advocates to participate and people interested in the affairs of the community to participate. It would be an open process, and everyone could have a say. And I'll just pause there and let Rob add on anything that you want to.
No, I think the real issue is how do we move forward on the public process? And JT and I have been discussing options. Vicky, JT and I have been discussing options, and it's critical to develop the plan with thorough public participation. And we see that happening within the next 6 months to a year.
Great. So, Rob, I'm going to let you speak to the workforce housing need. This is more your area of expertise than mine, but why don't you take this one away?
Thank you, JT. So interestingly, this property is served by both municipal water and sewer. And as we look down the road over a 3 to 4 year horizon, we felt it necessary to reserve 3 to 4 acres of land for the potential subdivision in a cottage style small home. We're thinking somewhere in the 850 to 1,000 square foot home for workforce housing, understanding that the town has a statutory obligation to provide housing that meets the local and regional need for workforce. And given that the market conditions here are such that it's not practical or it hasn't happened under normal market conditions, we felt securing this property for that purpose would allow us to move forward with a public outreach and planning effort and a structure that would ensure that they remained workforce housing and fit within the character of the Greensboro Road neighborhood.
That's great. And the town meeting warrant articles that we'll talk about in a second include a reference to all of these outcomes. And so this is sort of baked into the project structure in terms of the municipal commitment to this project. And the most exciting part of the project, Rob, I don't know if you have anything else to say about the water tank, but there's a water tank there.
I think it's fair to say that the tank is aging, and at some point we will need to replace it, and replacing it means building a new tank while this one remains online. A new tank will allow us to address fire flow, fire suppression flow in the Etna Road neighborhood, and also address our long-term infrastructure needs for water supply. So if you can imagine a like-sized tank slightly north of this one, and whether this one remains online or is replaced to increase capacity is unknown at this time. But it's simply a holding that will ensure that we can replace the tank when necessary or appropriate.
And it's important to do this now because once we create the community forest and it has those deed restrictions for conservation use, only things like other community services, police, fire station, school, highway department, library, even though it would be community-owned land, the deed restrictions will not allow it. It will keep it as conservation and open space. And so that's why we need to designate this cutout today, so we don't have a conflict with those deed restrictions. All right, so ambitious project, a lot of open space, some housing, a water tank, and a lot of work that has already gone into it and a lot of work ahead of us. So how is all this going to be financed is the question. I'm going to point you to the expense side of the ledger, the right side first. And we have our purchase price on the land acquisition. And we have our project costs. And so the project costs are things like the appraisal and the survey and the due diligence and the staff time and the legal fees and going through Hanover Planning Board and all of the work, as well as work that's led up to this for many years. And a lot of that is staff time and legal fees. And then the program reinvestment line is that when we have built a community forest program across northern New England, we have an equity component to our mission. So when we work in northern New Hampshire and Coos County, or in other parts of New England that are quite poor, we want to support those communities too and help them acquire community forests. And so when we're working in a wealth center and a community that has some capacity like Hanover, we oftentimes will try and add in a program reinvestment line, which allows us to keep our lights on and do the work that we do, but also bring our mission to those communities that really can't afford this kind of a project budget. And so we're asking to raise a small increment in Hanover that will be reinvested back in community forest work throughout northern New England, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine as a way to, fulfill that equity part of our mission. On the revenue side, there's a vote at town meeting coming up to commit $500,000. It comes from 3 trust funds. And because they're all trust funds, it's the Conservation Fund, the Brissett Fund, and the Capital and Land Improvements Fund. Because they're using trust funds, it won't affect the tax rate. So there's no new borrowing that has to go on. And so these are funds that are on hand, and the town meeting vote will be to apply them to this project. And again, it will not by itself raise the tax rate, which I want to say again, because I think that's very much a concern for people in the community. We've gotten some great news from a federal grant from the Community Forest Program, which is a U.S. Forest Service program. We were the #4 project in the country, and we've been awarded $600,000. And that's a very small program. It's extremely competitive, but we have already been awarded that funding. So that's really exciting for us. It's the largest grant they've given in this round. It's the cap on the program. And as I said at the beginning, when I gave the history of this project, we've had an anonymous donor from the community step forward at the very beginning. And that donor has really made a huge early investment. And you should think of that gift as being a challenge to the rest of the community to try and step up and make an important conservation outcome happen. It's something that there's been some early payments to help pay some of the project costs along the way, but the bulk of that is contingent on a successful closing. We've had a $102,000 gift from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation for some wetlands protection work through the Upper Connecticut River Mitigation and Enhancement Fund. We're going to resell the house. The $412,000 number that's there is a placeholder. That's based on an early appraisal, but it's probably in the right neighborhood, but it will be sold by the Trust for Public Land, and we will sell it for as much as we can get, but it's also, you know, we have to do some planning for the budget, and that will be part of how we finance this whole effort. And then we're about to apply to a grant from the state through the LCHIP program for $200,000. And that leaves a $219,000 gap that we really would like to work with the town and the Hanover Conservancy and the neighborhood to raise that missing increment to make this project successful. And so we're in the quiet phase of talking to some donors in the community, and we'll go into a more public phase probably in the fall once we hopefully have some additional commitments and some momentum behind us. We've learned that it's better to go into the public phase when you don't have such a large gap. And so we will work quietly behind the scenes to try and identify some early philanthropists who can help us, and then come out to the whole neighborhood to help us put us over the top in the fall. So the process moving forward, town meeting is coming up on June 23rd. We hope you vote yes for the articles. Rob and the town staff can't say that, but I can. It's really key that this vote happen and get support, and we hope it's a strong base of support, especially from this neighborhood. As the public health situation allows, or as we find the right technology, we're going to have a community engagement process. And we really want the community to have a stake in this. So what kind of trails, how can you engage the school kids to get out there? How does this fit with other trails in the community at Hypertherm or the Appalachian Trail or Barrel Farms Trail System? We'll have to go and break the property into its component pieces, and so that will require action by the planning board. And that's one of the reasons why we're engaging a surveyor now, is to be able to put the planning board materials together. We already talked about the fundraising campaign, and then we'll have a real estate closing. So the target date on our contract is that we have to have all the money raised by mid-January, and then we'd have, I think it's 45 days to close. So we probably would actually be closing in March of next year. And then post-closing, we would finalize the management plan, including input from a consulting forester and all of you as community members. And then it would be up to the Town Conservation Commission and the various partnerships to go into the implementation phase. So how do you all get involved? Vote. And Rob, do you want to just talk briefly about some of the logistical things for town meeting, what to expect?
I can try to address them. It's still somewhat fluid. We're working out scenarios for the business portion of town meeting, that portion where we gather together normally and have the opportunity to amend motions and discuss them openly. May occur via Zoom webinar, subject to the Secretary of State's approval. We have a backup contingency where the business portion may occur during Zoom webinar, and then drive-through voting could occur the following day. The alternative may actually be a parking lot meeting at Dewey Field or something like that, where we rent the equipment necessary to communicate over AM radio and allow for drive-through voting over the process through the meeting. All scenarios are being looked at. I can tell you that our moderator is favoring Zoom webinar. We did a dry run yesterday and a mock-up today to submit to the Secretary of State's office. So if all goes well, we will have a program in place that will allow us to conclude the business portion of the meeting and vote on Article 23 on June 23rd and know the results of that vote instantaneously.
So stay tuned. It will be the most unusual town meeting you've ever been to. We're also going to want volunteers, particularly trail maintenance volunteers, but also there's some invasive species that need to be managed. There might be a bridge to build over Mink Brook. There's going to be a need to steward this property, and volunteers are always needed. And then we hope that you would become contributors to the Trust for Public Land and the Hanover Conservancy. If you are inclined, please get in touch with Karen or me or Adair Mulligan or Betsy McGeehan. We're all available. My email will be on the last slide. But we're sort of looking for people that are the early philanthropists who can help us move the needle on our private goal in a large way now, and then we'll invite the whole community to participate later on once hopefully we've shrunk our gap from where it is today. So this is the end of the formal presentation. We've got plenty of time for questions. And Karen, do you want to play traffic cop here and help unmute you? So if you have a question, you can put it into the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself, I think.
I'm just going to jump in. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Hi. Renee Sullivan. I live next to this property, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear this news. And I know that my neighbors right now are all very excited as well, but none of us were able to join because we heard last minute. So how can I make sure that they are able to get information and join these kind of calls regularly or whenever they happen and not have it be like a last minute thing? Who should we contact?
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So if you can send me their email addresses, I don't know if you've got that, or somehow we can get in touch. I'll walk down the street. We did record this session, so I think we'll be able to share it.
Great.
And then they'll be on the
Karen,
regular disc.
JT?
Can you chat your email address for us
Sure.
all? Thanks so much.
JT?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
There's been a request to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. There we go. Is that better?
The request, someone I believe wanted to see more faces, so they made that request. Yes, it's better, she replied.
Okay, great. Other question. So, and just to follow up. So and I apologize because the rollout on this has been not ideal. And so having last minute word and not having proper notification, we had hoped to do this in a much more public way, but as we've been all struggling with the public health situation, it's just very hard to roll something like this out into the public at this time. And so please bear with us and be patient. But we did a press release, we got word in the Valley News, and out of that came a lot of questions and some buzz. And Karen, as a neighborhood member, said we really need to do something to help the neighborhood understand what's going on. And so this is step one, but there'll be many more of these through official channels hosted by the town. But we could act a little more nimbly and have this done as an informal neighborhood thing. And so by all means, feel free to get a hold of anyone at the Hanover Conservancy or the Town Planning Department or the Trust for Public Land, and we're happy to walk you through what's going on. And there'll be many more opportunities to have an official public meeting as hosted by the town.
Sylvia has a question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for the fabulous work you have all been doing. I think this is what a great, beautiful project you have brought, to light, and we're super happy. I'm super happy, and happy to help you in any way I can. So many thanks.
Thank you, Sylvia. That's wonderful. And I hope that you'll stick with the process and offer some thoughtful input as we get to the management planning and the visioning and all of that. Other questions, concerns? Anyone spitting mad?
I'm spitting happy. I am the abutter to the west of the property, of the north part of the property. And I am delighted.
Great, that's wonderful to hear. You know, if
I'd
you,
also
since
like
you
to
are an abutter, and if you have additional questions, please get a hold of us. We're happy to walk you through all of the details. I mean, we hope that this is an asset for you as a homeowner and you in the whole neighborhood. And so please let us know if we can, you know, fill you in on more detail. We're still working out a lot of the specifics on things like the affordable housing, workforce housing piece, and trailheads and parking and all of that. That's all to come, but we wanted to share what we know today.
We have a hand raised by JMA.
Yes, Justin. Yep. Thank you. Sorry. I'm on my phone because my computer's upstairs and the kids are sleeping. But I missed a little bit of the middle of the presentation, but I just had a quick question. We live at 99 Greensboro, so right to the west on the south side of the street. And we're also thrilled, really excited. And one thing I missed, is there any reason to anticipate that we'd run into trouble with the vote at the town meeting? And is there anything we can be doing to positively impact the community in advance of that?
So I think the town officials probably shouldn't answer that, so I will make an attempt.
I realized it was kind of a public forum for that question, but I figured why not ask?
Yeah, no. I mean, we wanted to do this in a private setting. It's not an official public meeting, and I don't want to put Rob on the spot. This got unanimous endorsement from the Board of Selectmen to put it on the ballot, on the warning, and as it's been voted on by the Select Board and the Conservation Commission, it has received very strong support. But I don't leave these things to chance, and we're in a very turbulent economic time, and people need to, you know, get out and vote, and voting right now is challenging with public health and all of that. So I would say if you want to get involved to rally the neighborhood and make sure people know what's going on and spread the word, that would be fantastic. And that vote is really critical. I'm not aware of any opponents or controversy at this point, but I also don't think that we should ever be complacent about these things.
Agreed. Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you think it would be appropriate for the neighborhood to do some sort of box ad in the Valley News with our perspective that we're in support of this? And please vote.
You know, Karen, that's an interesting idea. It certainly won't hurt. And, you know, we had considered doing something like a townwide mailing with a postcard, you know, advocating for this. Frankly, the expenses on that are probably not worth the return. But, you know, if you have some thoughts, or if you think that could be helpful, or if you think that's a good way to pass the word, we could certainly talk about that. And, you know, a few $100s is something that if it gets the word out and helps spread the good news, we can certainly afford that kind of modest investment. So let's talk further about that.
JT, we have a hand raised by Bob Holly.
Hi there, thanks. This is actually Suzanne Hawley. I'm not sure how the right way to ask this question is, but so it sounds like the hunting on the property is definite, that there will be hunting.
Well, so,
and I'll tell you where my question is leading.
Yeah.
Is my concern, we're not right on the property, but my concern for the people I know who live right on the property and what will, I don't know, how can we make sure that bullets aren't going to go zinging across their properties?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So so a couple things. One is that one of our funding sources through the state of New Hampshire, something called the New Hampshire Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, that we have in our project budget at $200,000, which is a pretty significant chunk of money to make up from anywhere else. If you take that grant funding, you're required to provide pedestrian public access, including for hunting. And so it will become, if we get the grant and if we accept the grant, it will become a requirement. The other thing I'd just say is that the deer in there are really kind of out of control. I've looked at it from a forestry point of view, and there's a real problem with over-browsing. And so hunting may be actually advantageous from an ecological point of view as well. I know that on the watershed lands over in the Truscott Company, they've been really trying to encourage hunting there to try and manage the deer population. So I think, you know, our funding plan is going to require hunting, and there is likely to be a management reason for it. But I also think that this is where signs, you know, information at the trailhead, you know, education about conflicts during that time of the year. There's a lot of work that can probably be done to try and manage the situation if it becomes a problem. And that's where that community engagement piece comes from. So the more we've learned about this is that, you know, if you have competing user groups, the more community engagement and education and signs and things like that, it's a way to manage through those sorts of dilemmas. But just the bare truth is that if with our current funding model, the property will be open to hunting.
Just can I add one comment to that?
Absolutely.
I'm not against hunting in any way, but one thing you just said sort of struck me, and I would like, when we're talking about the neighbors' safety, I think it's important to deal with these things before it becomes a problem. I don't remember exactly what you said, but you know, you said something like, yeah, if it becomes a problem, you know, it'll be really important too. But when we're talking about something like people's safety, it's just important to manage it before it becomes a problem. That's all.
Absolutely. And I think the town has worked their way through this on many other town properties. And so, you know, I don't know if Rob or Vicky can speak to that, but this wouldn't be the first place that this has come up. So
I can certainly try to speak to it, but ask Vicky to chime in if I miss something. Farfield, for example, is open to hunting currently, and is part of our deer management program where we award, where we have been granted additional hunting permits to take doe. And we're trying to cull the doe population in order to limit deer browsing and maintain a healthy forest and ecosystem. So Vicky has championed this program. It's not something we typically find in a planning department, but this will be year 3 coming up. And it's an important component of managing very intelligent deer, Hanover deer, as I like to refer to them. They look both ways before they cross the street and do other things that I don't see normal deers do. So we do have a healthy deer population, and they impact our neighborhoods and our forests. So we need to be proactive in addressing that while maintaining safe hunting programs. We have a hand raised by Margaret Bragg again.
Just so you know, there is hunting that takes place on that property now. It has been posted for many years, but the Leavitts do hunt, and they allow some of their friends and relatives to hunt there. So there is deer hunting that goes on.
great, that's great to know. and that's consistent with what the families told me. And actually, I think it is actually that the Leavitts would like to see it kept as a working forest and open to hunting and open for recreation. I mean, I think that's part of the legacy that they're hoping to leave for the town and for the property.
We have a hand raised, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, as we get closer to the vote on the 23rd of June, if someone might do a short, really very enthusiastic little blurb saying why this is really important to our community, that we as individuals could put up like on our Facebook pages to our friends. So even if we each only get 5 or 8 people more to vote or to turn out for the meeting, it might be of value, but it'd be kind of nice if we knew that what gets put up is well done.
That's great. And I'm going to book that for Adair and Karen to help with that, because I think the Conservancy has really been a great partner on this project and is really the voice of conservation in Hanover and has a tremendous network. And so we at the Trust for Public Land have been really relying on the Hanover Conservancy as the local land conservation partner. And this is exactly the kind of message and communication that I think comes best from the local partner. But Adair, you and I can talk about how to do that sort of thing and spread the word. That's a wonderful idea.
I don't see any other questions.
Wow, no one in the peanut gallery either, and no Zoom bombers. This has been a very successful rollout meeting. So, going once?
Oh, no, okay. Let me end like Sylvia started by just saying this is amazing. The amount of people who have put in just enormous amount of thought and time so that all of us end up with the possibility of this wonderful outcome. We cannot possibly say thank you enough.
Well, thank you. I got invited into Hanover a long time ago and have been working on this project for, by the time it closes, it'll be a decade. So this one is hard fought and we're not done yet. There's a lot of money still to raise and a lot of work still to do, but it actually feels like we've got some great momentum and we're headed in a good direction, and I'm very optimistic. So I ask for all of your support on the town meeting vote, and we hope that you'll help spread the word to your friends and neighbors. And when the time comes to open your checkbooks, that would be wonderful as well. Again, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of money to raise, but we're really in a good position, and we've got tremendous momentum as we sort of launch the public phase of this project. So thank you for coming, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, JT.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Rob.
I also want to say thank you to the Hanover Conservancy and JT and Vicky for really working hard on this. This has been a long fought battle, and everyone has, I think, should be, I'll clap quietly here and thank you all for your efforts.
And also thank you to Karen for setting up the Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
Good to see everybody.
So if anyone didn't get an email from me and you want to be on the distro list, I did put my email address in the chat. It's kgeiling@comcast.net. Feel free, and I'm happy to field questions or help direct you to the right person to give the answers.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks.
Good job.
See you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.